Good evening. I'm Howard K. Smith in Washington. Harry Reasoner's on vacation. These are tonight's headlines. Israel, mourning its dead and angered at the killers, prepares to hold a state funeral tomorrow for the 11 Olympic team members slain in West Germany. The Olympic Games are resumed after memorial services attended by 80,000 persons are held in Munich. President Nixon directs the Secretary of State to consult with other nations on international security measures against terrorists, and both houses of Congress by unanimous vote adopt a resolution calling for world isolation of any nation encouraging terrorism. Reports tonight from YITZHAK on the violent climax of yesterday's Arab terrorism at the Olympics, Peter Jennings on the memorial services in Munich for 11 murdered Israelis, Ted Koppel on the State Department's initiative towards international action against terrorism, Frank Reynolds on Senator McGovern's meeting with a group of Los Angeles rabbis, David Snell on fun and work at the Southern Governors Conference, and tonight's comment on the nature of Arab terrorism. Despite a few bad decisions by judges, some disappointments and petty mistakes, the Munich Olympics were on the way to becoming the pleasantest Olympics because the West Germans worked to make them so. Today, one observer gave them a new name, the Bloody Olympics. Altogether, 17 people were slaughtered yesterday, 2 in the Olympic Village and the other 15 in the shootout at the airport. We begin a program devoted almost entirely to the Munich atrocity with a report on the shootout last night. ABC's YITZHAK was there.
There are still a lot of questions to be answered about what happened last night at Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base. However, the German authorities admit that they tried to ambush the guerrillas and failed. The ambush was attempted soon after the guerrillas and their hostages arrived at the airport by helicopter. There they were supposed to have boarded a German jetliner for a flight to an Arab nation. The German government says it was convinced that this would have meant certain death for the Israelis, and the decision was made to try to either disable or kill the guerrillas at the airport. They admit that police sharpshooters opened fire first. The guerrillas who were not hit then opened fire on the hostages. When it was over, all 9 Israelis were dead. 5 guerrillas were killed, 3 others captured. A German policeman also died. What made the tragedy seem even worse was the fact that for hours last night, there was a report that all of the Israelis had been liberated, a report which was not denied at the time. German authorities blame poor communications with the airbase, which was completely sealed off. One newspaper summed it up by saying, "Whatever the truth about the tragic events of last night, Germany will emerge a loser." YITZHAK, ABC News, Munich.
The games were suspended yesterday as the crisis deepened. Late this morning they were resumed, but only after a hugely attended memorial service for the members of the Israeli team who died. ABC's Peter Jennings reports.
On most days, the stadium holds 80,000 eager track and field fans. Today, instead, they came to a memorial service, an hour of memory for 11 fellow athletes from Israel, slain yesterday during an abortive attempt by Palestinian guerrillas to gain the release of Arabs held prisoner in Israel. The Munich Philharmonic chose Beethoven's Eroica Symphony with which to begin. The surviving members of the Israeli Olympic team. Tomorrow, they will return home. Representatives from almost all of the 122 countries participating here. Arab athletes did not attend, though in many cases because they were bound by political restraints over which they had no control. In what can only be called a state of shock and devastation, thousands of Germans who had seen their games of serenity turned overnight into the Olympics of terror. It fell to the Israeli team's chief delegate to offer a slim hope that the games could be serene again sometime in the future.
I should like to solemnly confirm here that the athletes of Israel will continue to participate in the Olympic competitions in a spirit of brotherhood and fairness, despite this abominable crime. It is in deep sorrow that the Israeli delegation leaves the Federal Republic of Germany today.
After the President of Germany spoke, Avery Brundage, the President of the International Olympic Committee, echoed what was really the majority sentiment here.
We have only the strength of a great ideal. I'm sure the public will agree that we cannot allow a handful of terrorists to destroy this nucleus of international cooperation and goodwill. The games must go on.
10 days ago, when the 20th Olympiad began, this stadium was a riot of color, proud and beaming faces from around the world. As the Munich Philharmonic concluded with the Egmont Overture by Beethoven, hearts and minds today were heavy with the thought that something was wrong with mankind. Peter Jennings, ABC News, at the 20th Olympiad.
Munich has the well-earned reputation of being one of the most pleasant and pleasure-seeking cities in Germany, or indeed in the world. That's why the Germans wanted the Olympics there, to soften the memory of Hitler's Iron Olympics of 1936 in Berlin. Yesterday's events left a pall, but it won't last. ABC's YITZHAK again.
A lot of the spirit has obviously disappeared from these Olympic Games, but the form at least is continuing. The official 24-hour period of mourning has ended, and the athletes moved out of Olympic Village to the various training and playing fields. Although the Egyptian team, and naturally the Israelis, have withdrawn from the Games, there's no indication that any of the other nations plan to leave. They apparently have all decided to abide by the ruling of the International Olympic Committee that the Games should not be stopped. Most of the athletes agreed, and certainly most of the people of Munich who've been working for this event so hard and for so long. In the city of Munich itself, all of the flags are flying at half-mast, and many of them are hung with black bunting. The newspaper headlines tell of the shocking events of the past 24 hours. In front of stores, small crowds gathered to watch TV sets during the commemorative ceremony that was held today in the Olympic Stadium. And while the people of Munich were obviously shocked and saddened by what happened, that feeling is slowly beginning to wear off. The sidewalk cafes were crowded today as people took advantage of a bright sun that shone down on the city. Tourists walked through the main square sightseeing and taking pictures. And even the scalpers were back on the streets with their assortments of tickets to Olympic events that were going for 5 and even 10 times the regular admission price. YITZHAK, ABC News, Olympic Village.
Israeli reaction to the killings, that and other stories in a moment.
There's a headache out there waiting for you. When the pain comes, be ready for it with Bufferin. This illustrates by the time most of Bufferin is going to your headache, most of plain aspirin is still in your stomach. And with Bufferin, there's less chance of stomach upset, too. Be ready for your next headache with Bufferin. Faster to your headache, better for your stomach.
How's your headache? Tuned like a watch. I hope so. Got a lot invested in this car. Mike, I'll be thirsty after this. Get some beer.
When you have to get the beer, don't fool around. Get the beer named after the city that means beer. Old Milwaukee. Old Milwaukee is the fastest growing major beer in the country because it tastes as great as its name.
Oh, Milwaukee beer.
Most of the non-Arab world was still expressing shock today over the Munich massacre. Even Jordan, for the second day straight, denounced the action, saying, quote, "It was an ugly crime which has served to destroy the Arab cause." In Israel, Prime Minister Golda Meir expressed her government's appreciation for West Germany's action in trying to free the Israeli victims. Even so, in Tel Aviv, there were protest demonstrations outside the West German embassy. Associated Press reported late today that Israel has asked the United States to withdraw from the remainder of the Olympics in protest against the decision to continue the competition. There was no immediate word of response. One of the victims of the Munich attack was David Berger, a native of Cleveland, Ohio, who was a member of the Israeli weightlifting team. We have a report from Bill Baker of WEWS-TV, Cleveland.
Flags in Cleveland and the entire state of Ohio were ordered to half-staff in honor of 28-year-old David Berger. The Jewish athlete grew up in the affluent Cleveland suburb of Shaker Heights. He moved to Israel 3 years ago, according to his parents, in order to find the reality of life. David had dual citizenship. His boyhood room is filled with trophies and mementos of his weightlifting skill. David's father, Dr. Benjamin Berger, met briefly with reporters after an all-night vigil of television reports and overseas phone calls that eventually brought the news of his son's fate. After a great deal of soul-searching, Dr. Berger held the German government responsible for not adequately protecting the athletes.
I think the initial security in the village was poor. They didn't supply the security necessary, and I think that the Israelis depended in large part on the German government for their own security. It certainly was an error.
Dr. Berger does not believe in an eye for an eye and does not wish for more violence.
I think what I really hope is that the Israeli government doesn't take specific actions. I feel that anybody needlessly killed in any type of war is crime, and I see nothing gained by the Israeli government assuming reprisals against Lebanon or Syria or Egypt. I think absolutely nothing would come of that.
Dr. Berger feels the Olympic Games must continue so the disruptive goals of the Arab guerrillas are not achieved. For ABC News, this is Bill Baker in Shaker Heights, Ohio.
A final note from Munich. Last week, American Rick DeMont won the gold medal in the 400-meter freestyle swimming event. Today, the International Olympic Committee took the medal away. DeMont, who has asthma, was disqualified for taking ephedrine, an asthma medication which is on the list of drugs banned by the Olympic Committee. In the U.S., President Nixon today ordered tighter security for Israeli citizens in this country and for others who might be the targets of Arab terrorists. The White House refused to discuss what specific measures will be taken, but the executive machinery is already in operation. ABC diplomatic correspondent Ted Koppel reports.
The administration's eagerness to demonstrate decisive reaction took a variety of forms. A uniformed subsidiary of the Secret Service was instructed to strengthen security measures around the Israeli, West German, and several Arab diplomatic missions. But the United States is still struggling with the much more complex question of how to translate diplomatic outrage into effective international action. By coincidence, the International Civil Aviation Organization is meeting at the State Department this week. They're dealing strictly with the question of hijacking, but for Secretary of State Rogers, it was a convenient forum to react to the Munich incident.
It seems almost beyond our comprehension that action can't be taken to stop these acts. The government of the United States is prepared to take the most firm, severe action that the international community is prepared to join in.
At the Israeli embassy here in Washington, visitors signed a memorial guest book, while upstairs, just before a late afternoon meeting with Secretary Rogers, Ambassador YITZHAK RABIN stressed the need for immediate international action.
I believe that there are enough free democratic countries that can find effective means to bring home to those individuals, to those organizations, to those countries that still offer freedom of action to these insane terrorists, and to make it clear to them in practical terms that unless they do something, they are going to suffer.
For the Israelis, the alternatives are limited. If they are to refrain from reprisal, they must be reasonably confident that their restraint won't be interpreted as a sign of weakness. And unless the rest of the world is willing to back its rhetoric with action, the Israelis will be left to their own devices again. This is Ted Koppel, ABC News, outside the Israeli embassy.
I'll have more news in a moment.